Now, authenticity is another one of our most popular megatrends. Again, another word that's been thrown around quite a bit in the last few years. Now, the reason why authenticity is an entire megatrend of its own is because social media and a general resistance to things like traditional advertising, large media companies, and the like have created a desire for something that's raw and truthful, and yes, quite adventurous. Now, when it comes to food, what this means is there's been a shift away from luxury and status and more toward exclusivity and culture savvy. Basically, what that means is that in order to really seem like you know what you're talking about when you talk about food, you need to truly understand what the consumer needs, what they want, and what will make them feel like they're getting insider information. Now for this, I want to show you a bar from Trend Hunter's hometown of Toronto, Canada. It's called Mahjong Bar. And one of the reasons why it's so popular is because it's a speakeasy. And if you don't know it's there, then you will not see it. It's hidden behind this convenience store, which looks pretty normal. But once you pass through those doors, you enter into a beautiful bar with craft cocktails and a really great authentic experience. Another example just outside of dining for this is craft convenience stores. So 7-Eleven has released their 7-Eleven Evolution stores, which carry more small batch products to convey a greater sense of authenticity. There's even a focus on carrying local brands. Ultimately, good food is no longer about cost or status. It's about joining consumers on their food journey. And in fact, it is a journey. 75% of travelers consider a good food scene motivation to visit a destination, because to them, that represents experiencing something that they've never experienced before. Food is an adventure. And in the words of the great Anthony Bourdain, find out how other people live and eat and cook, and learn from them wherever you go. Now, of course, at this time, people are not able to go and travel to new places and try new foods. And so half of consumers are using cooking at home to try new foods and experiment with new ingredients. And I'd like to show you a few of the ingredients that are popping up on Trend Hunter's trend platform. So for example, we have rice-berry rice, which is very popular in Thailand. That's popping up more internationally. Amazake, which is an ancient Japanese rice product that's popping up not just in food, but also in cosmetics. We're seeing buckthorn berry, which is slowly being introduced to North America as a sort of nutritional ingredient. But there's also another ingredient, one that you may recognize, cannabis. Yes, cannabis has become a greatly popular ingredient in food as of late. Now, if some of you are thinking about that and thinking that is very risky, that's something that my company would never touch, honestly, if food is an adventure, remember that adventure should be risky. And perhaps it isn't specifically about cannabis. Maybe it's about another risky ingredient or another upcoming ingredient that you could try. However, do note that cannabis is going the way of tattoos, online dating, and plastic surgery. All of these are things that used to be taboo, but are now becoming more and more mainstream. And not only from the consumer perspective is cannabis becoming more mainstream, it's also a really great thing to invest in currently. It's projected to be a $57 billion industry by 2027 and has already impacted everything from tourism to sponsorships to wellness to CPG and beyond. Now, with that in mind, I want to show you a few of the more interesting cannabis trends that we've seen over the past few years, specifically in the world of food. Now, first off, we have snackable CBD, which is specifically about protein bars, and the idea that this ingredient can be pushed as a nutritional value. Then we have soothing sustenance, which is about using cannabis as an ingredient to promise anxiety reduction and a sense of soothing. We also have alcohol imitation. Now this one I find very interesting. Cannabis brands are looking to enter into the alcohol industry and sort of replace it, as today's consumers are less invested in this idea of partying and are more interested in what can kind of calm them down and keep them centered. while still providing a new and interesting feeling. But one of the insights that I want to highlight is THC accent. Now, I find this very interesting. What we're seeing are brands enhancing the dining and flavor experience with condiments that have THC in them. Now, the reason why this interests me so much is because it focuses less on the feeling that cannabis will provide as an ingredient and more on the flavor that cannabis will provide as an ingredient, which is something that I myself hadn't really considered until I saw this trend. Turns out that there's a company called 7 Acres, which is helping people select cannabis by taste instead of by feeling. What you're actually seeing is live footage of me completing the quiz on the website to tell them what flavors I'm most interested in. I like honey, I like citrus, and I like sage. And then it moves on to ask you for descriptors. How would you describe yourself? What do you want to experience? Apparently, I think I'm laid back, spicy, and sweet. This is a little embarrassing. I didn't expect it to be. Anyway, by the end of it, I got a recommendation for what kind of cannabis I should look into based not on the kind of high I would receive, but on the flavors that I'm most attracted to. Now, dovetailing off of that, we get to our second cannabis insight that I want to highlight in full, which is cannabis cuisine. Now, this is all about brands facilitating at-home cooking for cannabis-based recipes. We're seeing entire lifestyle brands dedicated to this. We're seeing Kitchen Toke, which is a culinary cannabis magazine, a wide series of cannabis-focused cooking classes, and even cannabis cooking journals where you can build up your own cannabis recipes. But one example I wanted to highlight was cannabis cooking influencers. So the Cannabinista is kind of documenting her passion for cooking and cannabis. And actually, if you land on her page and you look at her photos, you'll think that this is just a regular food blog. You'll think that this is somebody who's a foodie influencer making all these interesting dishes, but each of these dishes is laced with cannabis. Now, she doesn't have a sponsorship as yet, but if we think about the influencers in other industries, then I'm sure we can all agree that eventually influencer marketing will make it so that she becomes a part of a greater brand image. So that's something to consider for your own brand. And that takes us to our final polling question. Now, this is going to be a fun one. Do you believe the cannabis-infused food trend will last? No, I think it's a simple fad. Or yes, I believe it's here to stay. Leave that for a few more seconds. Okay. Here we go. The majority think that it is here to stay. That could be good news, depending on who you are. All right. So that takes us more or less to the end of our presentation. To review, we talked about the 3 ingredients to the modern foodie. First is prosumerism, and that need to use food as a vehicle to communicate something about who they are, and also to interact with food content and learn new skills. We talked about experience. Now, when it comes to food, what consumers want is an opportunity to build memories around the act of eating or cooking. Many of those consumers are looking to do so with their family. So this is a multi-generational consideration. And finally, authenticity. So the general idea that consumers today want to use food as a vehicle for adventure. And so that means they want to see food brands make more bold choices, perhaps even use ingredients that are a little bit risky.